Hello and welcome. So, manifestation is a very popular topic right now, not just in the practice of it as manifestation coaching or manifestation practice, but also we find these terms coming into our daily life conversations. Our celebrities talk about manifestation a lot, and even we see a lot of reels, sometimes very casually and sometimes even seriously. We all talk about manifestation or the law of attraction. We use Paulo Coelho's alchemist quotes also to legitimize it. Even that can be knowingly or unknowingly, and very rarely we see even qualified psychologists and those who don't have any qualification in psychology but yet call themselves psychologists, or many of them also practicing or promoting manifestation or these kind of practices. So, in this episode, we'll be looking at what psychology has to say about these practices, or what where the psychology lie in this topic. So, what is manifestation? Since this is not an academic topic, there's no single, uh, you know, uh, definition that is accepted by everyone. But in general, manifestation is the belief that you can attract success in life or money or abundance through positive self-talk, visualization, and behaving, as if you have already achieved your goal. So this, that these can translate to actual outcomes in your life. And manifestation uses a lot of theories, most of them pseudoscientific theories, including the law of attraction and others. And many times, local myths and local stories are also co-opted into this practice of manifestation. So this particular theory of law of attraction, it also posits that our thoughts, our intentions, and our emotions have actual causal effect on shaping our life's outcomes. And most of these reason that this happens with with some kind of a collaboration between our intentions, thoughts, and emotions and some supernatural or universal forces. But a lot of people may have this experience of manifestation working for them, and that is why it makes, like many other practices, it makes so popular also. So we have to understand what are the principles, or how some of us feel that manifestation works for us. There are some non-psychological phenomena which have been studied for quite some time now, which we can attribute to the so-called success. And in general, it is, we have to understand that our own beliefs and the beliefs of people around us can actually influence outcomes in our life. But there is always limits to that, and most of these are a part of psychological study also. There is this effect called Pygmalion effect, which which was studied initially in classrooms and then in outside contexts also, where expectations of an authority figure like a teacher about the students, these can be conscious or unconscious, or not very consciously expressed. These expectations can actually shape the performance of students. So that's the Pygmalion effect. Then there is this, self-fulfilling prophecies, which we study a lot in persuasion and attitude formation, in social psychology in general, where you believe something or you expect something to happen, and then you unconsciously, your own actions and activities, make sure that your initial thoughts become true. These can be negative and positive too. And there is the skill of emotion regulation, which we address in various therapy models. There is this concept of self-talk. Self-talk can be positive or negative, and many of our negative self-talks can be irrational. So what we do in therapy is we understand some of these negative self-talks, and we try to address them. So these are all techniques and theories in psychology which are studied actually, and they can all achieve some of the so-called effects that we think, or some people attribute to manifestation, or the universe doing something to help you. In fact, even without invoking any supernatural phenomenon, we can actually study and understand some of these phenomenon, and they are a part of the growing psychological evidence on human performance and human activities as well. So now there is this question of if they are all the same, like whether you call it manifestation or whether you call it self-efficacy or something else. Why bother? Like why bother about the label? So that is where some of the recent research about manifestation itself comes into play. So there have been some studies published in 2025 and 26. One of them was a large scale survey, which was conducted among people who practice and believe in manifestation. And they found out that there are two principal components to this belief of manifestation. So one is personal power, the power of yourself or personal power, and the second part is cosmic collaboration. So personal power is maybe acceptable to some extent, but then when you involve something like cosmic collaboration, uh, there's always this risk of pseudoscience coming in, exploitation coming in, and unethical practices coming in, which can be, may not be even of any good, but then they can do a lot of harm to people also. And that is why we need to understand why these labels are also, why we have to be careful about the labels. So the studies have found that people who manifest, or people who practice manifestation, actually enjoy some positive expectations about themselves and their outcomes, but they also make very risky financial decisions. Practice of manifestation is associated with greater risk of bankruptcy, and also a risk of fraud victimization, falling prey to financial frauds. So this is a vicious circle which we have to be alert about. And there is also this other problem of generalizing every outcome to your own thinking. It is tone deaf, and it actually is blind to many of the structural inequalities that actually prevent people from achieving the outcomes, even when they put in some effort. Effort as the other. So there are a lot of social factors that also come into play. So when you focus only on your self talk, or when only on your positive attitude or your mindset, we actually discount most of these other social factors also. And there is this high risk of people resorting to magical thinking instead of seeking actual solutions when you bring in these kind of cosmic collaboration components into what can actually be uh, practiced, or something where you can actually use scientific evidence which actually exists. So what we have to be careful about, or what we have, so if there are problems in your life which we need to address, it is always better to look at factors like self-efficacy, emotion regulation, self-regulation, etc. These are all skills, these are all psychological theories. There are studies behind them, there is evidence that we can work on a lot of them. So self-efficacy, for example, is your own belief about your ability to do something. And self-efficacy can be very general, and self-efficacy can be very context specific also. There is language self-efficacy, there can be academic self-efficacy. So each of these, we can measure them, we can work on improving them, and we can actually measure the outcomes also. There is emotion regulation, which is very important, which has been shown to be a major determinant of your life's outcomes and your happiness. There is self-regulation, which is a set of skills, just like life skills or problem solving skills. Self-regulation is a set of skills that you can actually practice and improve upon. And these are the actual areas on which we can look at. If you need that, if you see that there are areas in life that we need to work upon. And it is always okay to seek professional help if your normal life is affected, even if you don't have very destabilizing situations, or there is no huge high distress, but even if your normal life is affected some way, you can always seek professional help also. And if you are a psychologist, it is always safe to not use these terms, even if they seem very cool, and they even if everybody around us seem to be using these terms very normally. But if you are a professional, it is always good to stick to terms and theories which have actual evidence backing, and to refrain from using terms only because they are cool or they are popular. So that was a glimpse about what makes manifestation or these theories so popular, and what we should actually be looking at. So thank you for listening.